Ziggy Stardust, Major Tom, the Thin White Duke. All these characters had different nature, unique appearance, and backstory, but they have one thing in common: the person who invented them and who was so immersed in them that he almost lost his own self. Today we'll take a journey through the strange and incredibly interesting life of a famous musician, David Bowie. The talented performer became an example to the whole world of how not to be afraid to express yourself and why you should never give up. Before becoming a successful singer, he changed bands numerous times, and he didn't find true love the first time either. But first things first, you are on the Enco Stories channel. Get comfortable, and let's get started. David Bowie is a well-known name to everyone in the world, although, in fact, he is David Robert Jones. The future famous singer was born on January 8, 1947 in one of the oldest districts of London, Brixton. It is symbolic that he was born on the same day as Elvis Presley. His mother, Margaret Mary Peggy, had Irish roots, although she was born in the Shorncliffe Army Camp in England. Father Hayward Stanton John Jones was from the English town of Doncaster. The husband worked at Barnardo's, a charity that cared for orphans, and Mary worked as a waitress in a cinema. The couple officially got married when David was already 8 months old. At first, the family lived at 40 Stansfield Road. In the same area, little Bowie attended Stockwell Infant School, which was something like a preparatory school. The boy was a very capable student, but at the same time stubborn, and had a rather abrupt manner. Later in 1955, the family moved to Sandridge Park. David went to Burnt Ash Junior School, and it was there that his attraction to music began to manifest itself. He sang in the school choir, played the recorder, danced, and kept his balance very well for a 9-year-old. The boy was delighted when his father was able to get his hands on a whole record collection of American 45s, which were quite difficult to find in the UK in those days. Little Bowie listened to the Teenagers, the Platters, Fats Domino, and Elvis Presley. And Little Richard's song Tutti Frutti enchanted David. Bowie would later say that he had heard God.
Boy, you don't know what you do to me, Tutti Frutti, oh Rudy.
Elvis Presley was also one of David's favorite artists. When the boy saw his cousin Christina's fiery dances to Hound Dog, he liked the song so much that he started buying the artist's records. During his childhood, Bowie and Christina often turned on music and, according to their cousin, danced like possessed elves. Inspired by all the artists mentioned above, David became even more passionate about music. He started learning to play the ukulele, bass guitar, and piano. Together with his friends, the boy performed covers of Presley and Chuck Berry for local scouts of Wolf Club Pack, who called the amateur group mesmerizing, like someone from another planet. The father saw his son's desire to become an artist and tried in every way to support the boy on this path. For example, he took his son with him to prepare for the annual Royal Variety performance, which raised money for people in the creative professions and entertainment industry workers who had retired or had problems that made them no longer able to support themselves. David not only saw behind the scenes of the grand event, but also met such artists as Tommy Steele and Alma Cogan. Studying at Burnt Ash Junior came to an end, and Bowie went to Bromley Technical High School to get his secondary education. Owen Frampton, one of the art teachers, played a special role there. He encouraged his own son, who also studied at this school, and other children to study art. Owen described David of those times in his still unpublished autobiography as follows. David was quite unpredictable. He was completely misunderstood by most of my teaching colleagues, but in those days, cults were unfashionable, and David, by the age of 14, was already a cult figure. David was immersed in the studies and was especially interested in music and art. His older half-brother, Terry, also had a big influence on him during this period. He introduced the boy to the work of modern jazz artists and beat authors, and made him interested in Buddhism and occult art. Unfortunately, the brothers were not able to spend much time together. Terry Burns suffered from mental disorders, so he spent most of his time in treatment. In general, most of Bowie's maternal family had schizophrenia or other mental illnesses. One of his aunts even had a lobotomy. This greatly influenced the early work of the musician, and he dedicated at least 2 singles to his brother Terry, All the Madmen and The Beulah Brothers. The love of jazz, inspired by his older brother, made the boy master the alto saxophone, which his mother gave him in 1961. He was assisted by baritone saxophonist Ronnie Ross. As for studying at school, David's openness and sociability were noted there. This was well tracked thanks to the preserved annual reports of the educational institution. First year, reliable and capable. Second year, a good steady worker who should do well. Fourth year, a pleasant, friendly idler, but perhaps capable of better work with maturity. Fifth year, a complete exhibitionist. At the same time, the young man's scandalous nature began to manifest itself. Once, Bowie even got into a fight with his friend George Underwood over a girl. The latter accidentally hit the eye of the future musician with his own nail, causing him a very serious injury. David underwent several operations, but it was impossible to completely eliminate the damage. As a result, one of his pupils was always dilated, leading some people to mistakenly believe that Bowie had heterochromia, in which a person has a different eye color. Later, Bowie even thanked George for this because such a feature became a real trademark of the performer. In the future, they would continue to be friends and even work together. It was Underwood who became the author of some covers of the singer's records. In the same year, or rather in 1962, Bowie took the first steps towards his dream, namely gathering a musical band called Conrads. At that time, he was only 15. In Conrads, the band members were constantly changing. There were only 4 of them, then the number of musicians grew to 8. Nevertheless, they even performed at weddings with their rock. Passionate about music, David quit his studies and told his parents that he would become a star. David's mother decided that her son needed a more stable job, so she helped him get a job as an electrician's assistant. But this did not stop Bowie. He continued to search for himself, his style, and a suitable band. The musician left Conrads because he had bigger ambitions than other band members and joined King Bees. The band did not have a manager, and Bowie took it upon himself to solve this problem. Inspired by the Beatles, he turned to John Bloom, a well-known businessman at the time who, thanks to his unusual and aggressive marketing, became successful in the sales of washing machines. Audacious David wrote to him, "Do for us what Brian Epstein has done for the Beatles, and make another million." Bloom was probably very busy with the washing machine war he had unleashed, so he never answered the musician. However, he gave this letter to Leslie Kahn, who was a partner of Dick James, the Beatles' music publisher. Leslie Kahn became David Bowie's first manager. The musician decided to take the pseudonym Davy Jones and immediately began working on the first single. In 1964, together with the band, he released the song Liza Jane. It was put into rotation on the radio and played at music shows, but despite this, the song did not sell well. Disappointed, David left King Bees without hesitating and joined another band. That's how Bowie ended up in the blues band Manish Boys, which he later mentioned as following: "I used to dream of being their Mick Jagger." However, dreams were not destined to come true. The band released a cover of Bobby Bland's song I Pity the Fool, and it also failed. It's quite surprising considering that there was a scandal associated with this song which was supposed to add to its popularity. When the Manish Boys were due to appear on the BBC show Gadzooks, It's All Happening, to perform their single, the show's producer Barry Langford asked for the band to cut their hair before the show. Bowie's manager at the time, Leslie Kahn, decided to use the opportunity to promote himself and organized a protest by fans of long male hair outside the BBC office. In the event, Bowie and his band were allowed to retain their long hair on the condition that if an audience member complained, the band's fee would go to charity. No complaints were received. At the same time, Bowie created the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men. The 17-year-old artist even gave an interview to the BBC where he was outraged by the way men with long hair were treated on the street. It's not nice when people call you darling and that. But this story did not go beyond a small scandal, and Bowie decided to change the band again. Next was another blues band, Lower Third, with a completely similar situation. Success did not come, and the contract with manager Kahn was ending. Bowie was on the verge. He even wanted to give up music altogether and start studying pantomime at Sadler's Wells Theater. But the appearance of new manager David Ralph Horton brought him a collaboration with Pi Records. A big role in this was played by the fact that Bowie knew how to write songs. Therefore, the performer still remained in Lower Third and continued his efforts to become a popular artist. In 1966, the pop rock band The Monkees was created, and the problem was that one of its members had a name, David Jones. Of course, he and Bowie began to be constantly confused, so our hero had to think about a new stage name.
True story, I was Tom Jones for about a couple of weeks, and just as I was doing the photo session, he released his first record, It's Not On You.
David Bowie was the name that would gain him insane fame and go down in history. Why Bowie? This nickname was inspired by James Bowie, a participant in the Texas Revolution, and also by a knife named after him in which he allegedly used during battles. Bowie left Lower Third after another flop single, Can't Help Thinking About Me. Following a good tradition, he started working with another band called The Buzz. Together with the band, Bowie released 2 songs, Do Anything You Say and I Dig Everything. At the time, he was also working with the band Riot Squad, but their songs were never released. The label also changed. Instead of Pi Records, the artist signed an agreement with Durham Records. On June 1st, 1967, he released his debut album, which was called David Bowie. It included 14 tracks where he used brass instruments instead of a more standard pop rock sound. Although the album received favorable reviews from critics, it was not a commercial success due to poor advertising. In autumn, David wrote 2 more songs, Let Me Sleep Beside You and Karma Man, which were rejected by Durham Records, much to the artist's disappointment. Although a few years later, these singles would be heard all over the world and would also bring David and producer Tony Visconti together. In the same year, Bowie released the song The Laughing Gnome, which according to many fans was the worst song he ever recorded. Although years later, when Bowie asked his fans to vote by phone for the track he should play for his 1990 world tour, The Laughing Gnome was the most requested, but he never played it. Despite numerous attempts and changes of bands, managers, and labels, David never managed to get on the music charts. The disappointed performer returned to his other plan, to learn pantomime from the master of this art, Lindsay Kemp. At that time, the musician had no idea how it would affect his career. It was the study of dramatic art that helped Bowie create his own unique style. The characters and images invented by him would surprise and delight. But he didn't stop at music and wrote 2 songs. The sarcastic Over the Wall We Go about the conditions of British prisons, followed by Silly Boy Blue about a teenager who ran away from school and hid in London. If you think that Bowie's self-search in different bands has stopped, then you're wrong. He joined the Feathers Trio, which was founded by Hermione Farthingale. Another band member was guitarist John Hutchinson. Things were a little better there because Feathers had several performances during that year, and in their creative work they used pantomime, poetry, and played in the folk genre. All that was very much to Bowie's liking. Furthermore, David really liked Hermione Farthingale. The 19-year-old dancer and actress became the musician's first great love. The girl's father, a successful lawyer, was strictly against this relationship, but that did not stop Hermione. And Bowie later also wrote the song Life on Mars, some lines of which he dedicated to the girl and her misunderstanding with her family.
But her mother is yelling no, and her father has asked her to go.
However, Hermione's father should not have been too worried because the musician and the dancer did not live long as a couple. Hermione went to Scandinavia to star in the musical Song of Norway, and Bowie was left heartbroken. Some sources also claimed that the performer was unfaithful to the girl, and that also led to their breakup. Hermione never became a world-famous artist, unlike David, who had a great future ahead of him. Like all musicians, Bowie poured all his pain into his work. Of course, the band broke up after that situation. A broken heart did not stop Bowie from being popular with women. His next passion was journalist Mary Finnegan. They met accidentally. The young woman was simply fascinated by Bowie's guitar playing. Mary invited the man, whom she had known for only a couple of minutes, to tea, and then offered to rent a room from her for £5. He agreed, and they became not just roommates, but also lovers. David found a common language with her children, although he was afraid to get too close to them, probably because he understood the prospects of this romance. Bowie played them new songs, shared plans for the future, and Mary even helped him perform at the 3 Tons pub in Beckingham. Things took a bit of a turn for Bowie. He started organizing folklore events at the 3 Tons pub, which later turned into a real Beckingham Arts Lab, which gathered talented young people from all over London, and the place became very popular. David's career was gradually improving, especially facilitated by one great event for all mankind. Bowie began cooperation with Mercury Records and Philips, and together with them, urgently released the song Space Oddity, about his first fictional character, the astronaut, Major Tom. The excitement was due to the fact that on July 16, 1969, an American spacecraft made an incredible journey, and its commander, Neil Armstrong, became the first man to set foot on the moon. The event was broadcasted by the BBC, and guess what single was used as the soundtrack? Of course, Space Oddity. Finally, the thing Bowie wanted so much happened. The song took the 5th place in the charts. At the end of autumn, the artist presented his second album, David Bowie. Yes, the musician and his managers had certain problems with coming up with album titles. However, in 1972, the album was re-released as Space Oddity, but with another label, RCA Records. Lyrics about past relationships and other events from Bowie's life received positive reviews from critics, but it failed commercially. Like the previous record, David's personal life also underwent changes. In April 1969, Bowie met his future wife, Angela Barnett. The 19-year-old actress and model was introduced to the singer by music producer Calvin Mark Lee. It was a very interesting union in which there was no question of love. A year after meeting in 1970, the couple got married. They had an open marriage, meaning everyone could have a relationship on the side. Born in America, Angela did not hide that she married Bowie to be able to stay in the UK and build a career. We got married so that I could work to get a permit. I didn't think it would last, and David said before we got married, "I'm not really in love with you." And I thought, that's probably a good thing. The new Mrs. Bowie immediately got down to business and began to help her husband on his creative path. She was a big influence on David, which his manager, Kenneth Pitt, was not too happy about. As for Bowie, marriage made him cute, intimate, and nice, and the singer also dreamed of an heir. And so it happened. A year after the wedding, Duncan Zoe Haywood Jones, the firstborn of David and Angela, was born. After the release of Space Oddity, David became more famous as a solo artist, so he decided to assemble his own band. It included drummer John Cambridge, bassist Tony Visconti, and guitarist Mick Ronson. They were originally called the David Bowie Band, but later changed their name to Hype. Each member of the team had their own character and carefully selected costumes for their images. In general, everything that Bowie loved so much. However, the musicians' first performance became a complete failure, and they left the stage to the jeers and whistles of the audience. The band decided to put the main emphasis on Bowie as a solo artist. In their original cast, they did not last long due to the fastidious and scandalous nature of their frontman. Bowie was so unhappy with Cambridge's drumming that he once yelled at him, "You're my album." After that, his place in the team was taken by Mick Woodmansey. Manager Kenneth Pitt didn't last either. After his dismissal, Bowie hired Tony DeFries. However, Pitt was still able to obtain monetary compensation from the singer through the court. The first 10 years of David's career were like a mad race to find his style, the right band, and attempt to write hits, and as a result, he gradually became a significant figure in the music industry. In 1970, Bowie recorded his third album, The Man Who Sold the World. Hard rock sound in combination with blues perfectly complemented dark lyrical lines. In them, he sang about topics that he would explore for a long time during his life: war, religion, as well as mental disorders. Here, it is clear that we're talking about his half-brother Terry. David said that all the singles of the album mirror and answer each other. The album cover for Bowie was drawn by his friend Michael John Weller. It was an image of a cowboy with a gun in his hands against the background of a mental hospital. The musician was delighted, but not for long. In the end, he arranged a photo shoot in which he appeared in a blue satin dress.
Critics have claimed that you are more
critics.
The performer's light, long hair complemented the unusual image, but not everyone understood this idea, so the record changed the cover on each reissue. However, this did not prevent Bowie from wearing a dress to his interviews. The critics were delighted with such a bold image, and John Mendelsohn from Rolling Stone even compared him to the Hollywood star Lauren Bacall. Ordinary people, however, didn't understand that style, and once some passerby even pointed a gun and shouted, "Kiss my ass," to the musician. And which of David's images do you like the most? Write your opinion in the comments. It's very important for us. Let's discuss interesting moments of the singer's biography together. Let's return to David's creative path. In order to better promote the record The Man Who Sold the World, Bowie finally went on his first tour. During the tour, the musician paid attention to famous artists who worked in the style of proto-punk, in other words, garage rock. Inspired by their work, Bowie began to think about creating a new character. He wanted to do something like a melding of the persona of Iggy Pop with the music of Lou Reed, producing the ultimate pop idol. One of the artist's acquaintances remembered how he wrote down ideas on a napkin in the cafe, and there was something about a crazy rock star named Iggy or Ziggy. Bowie returned from the tour with a ready-made concept of the character who looks like he's landed from Mars. In the middle of 1971, the musician stopped performing and touring for a while and started working on new singles. If earlier he wrote them while playing the guitar, this time Bowie sat down at the keyboard, and in the winter he released his fourth record, Hunky Dory. The album turned out to be very melodic with a pop rock sound, but the real popularity David received using the Martian image whose name was Ziggy Stardust. Ziggy Stardust's extravagant costumes, makeup, and hairstyle, as well as his sound, made Bowie not just an icon of glam rock, we can say that he even formed this genre. With the appearance of a new character, David became not just a famous musician, but a real superstar. Bowie's Ziggy Stardust was the alter ego that changed music forever and sent his career into orbit. The character had his own story. Ziggy Stardust arrived on Earth, which was on the brink of destruction. The rock star saw that most people were generally detached from reality, and young people had chosen a lifestyle aimed only at gaining pleasure. No one on Earth needed rock music anymore. Infinity appeared to Ziggy in a dream and advised him to tell people about a star messenger who will save the world. Humanity, filled with faith and hope after such a prophecy, began to worship Stardust. But the happy ending never came. In the end, Infinity destroyed Ziggy on stage. The character's hairstyle was something special. Bowie used the dye Schwarzkopf red, which completely burned his hair. Instead of silky strands, it stood on end. The performer liked it so much that he tried to make it even tougher by various means. It was all the rage. Everyone wanted the same hairstyle, both men and women.
You have the coolest hair in rock and roll.
Thank you very
I have
much.
to say that right now.
The performer also paid special attention to the development of costumes, which were sewn for him by his friend, Freddie Beretti. The idea of the images was taken from the movie A Clockwork Orange. I wanted to take the hardness and violence of those Clockwork Orange outfits, the trousers tucked into big boots and the codpiece things, and soften them up by using the most ridiculous fabrics. It was a Dada thing, this extreme ultraviolence in Liberty fabrics. A total of 7 stage costumes were created for the Ziggy Stardust show by Japanese fashion designer Kansai Yamamoto. Bowie was so fascinated by his alter ego that for some time he did not create any other characters at all. During one interview, he said, "Off stage, I'm a robot. On stage, I achieve emotion. It's probably why I prefer dressing up as Ziggy to being David." Would you have given in to fashion in those days and made the famous Ziggy hairstyle? Write in the comments. We want to know. On February 10th, 1972, Bowie and his band presented the Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars show. Their performance at the Toby Jug Pub in Kingston became a sensation. David looked amazing in his extravagant suit with bright red hair. The band toured Great Britain for 6 months. It was not just a success. Probably no famous performer had such a powerful fandom. This was how a whole cult of David Bowie appeared. In 1972, Bowie released the concept album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. The record was included in many lists of the greatest albums in history. The lead single, Starman, hit the UK charts and became particularly popular after Bowie sang it on the BBC TV show Top of the Pops.
Didn't know what time it was and the lights were low.
That's how GQ UK editor Dylan Jones commented on this performance. This is the performance that turned David Bowie into a star, embedding a Ziggy Stardust persona into the nation's consciousness. To this day, this show is considered one of the best and most impressive live performances. It also took the concept of glam rock to a new level, making this genre incredibly popular for decades to come. However, Bowie's other performances were also spectacular. He liked to shock the audience and did whatever he wanted on stage. At one of the concerts, he stripped down to his underwear and also imitated the act of love with Ronson's guitar. And on another occasion, during a nervous breakdown, a drunken Bowie shaved off his eyebrows. However, this only further complemented the image of Ziggy's cosmic character. Should anyone think that these things are merely distractions or gimmicks intended to obscure the music's shortcomings, he mustn't come to my concerts. Bowie said, "He must come on my terms or not at all. My performances have got to be theatrical experiences for me as well as for the audience. I don't want to climb out of my fantasies in order to go up on stage. I want to take them on stage with me." The artist's behavior, incomprehensible to many people, was not limited to the stage. We've already said that the musician had an open marriage with Angela Barnett, but there were not only women among his lovers. In an interview with Melody Maker, Bowie called himself gay and later told Playboy that he was bisexual. If most artists at that time hid their personal lives, and even more so their orientation, there were no boundaries for Bowie. He did whatever he wanted. To understand the whole essence of David, it's better to listen to him.
In seconds of meeting somebody and I can adopt their accent, I've always found that I collect. I'm a collector.
In the image of Stardust, David gave concerts all over the world, which caused even more Ziggy fever. The youth imitated the character in everything, from hairstyles to platform shoes. Meanwhile, Bowie continued to release new hits. In 1972, he went on his first tour of America. Bowie took his friend John Underwood with him. According to Underwood, the artist needed the support of a true friend who would be honest with him, say, "Wake up if something is wrong," or vice versa. Everything's great. Bowie tried to stay grounded precisely thanks to his friends, with whom he communicated since his youth, but even relatives could not stop what happened to the singer next. In 1974, the musician moved to America and in the spring presented the record Diamond Dogs. It also featured a new character, Halloween Jack. Some biographers have called this record Bowie's last work in the glam rock style. As a basis for Diamond Dogs, he took ideas from the musical based on Ziggy Stardust and the novel 1984. It's no wonder why the album was released with an inclination towards apocalyptic and dystopian themes. Bowie embarked on a new US tour in support of the record. He updated the choreography and impressed everyone with a theatrical production with a lot of special effects. While on tour, BBC director Alan Yenta began filming a documentary about David, but the release of Cracked Actor shocked the audience. The footage showed that the singer was in a bad physical and emotional state. Bowie embodied himself so strongly in his characters that he could no longer distinguish the fictional heroes from his own self. During this period, the musician began to become addicted to prohibited substances. Ziggy wouldn't leave me alone for years. That was when it all started to go sour. My whole personality was affected. It became very dangerous. I really did have doubts about my sanity. The singer's condition worsened every day. He developed paranoia. The only way out at that time would be to abandon the image of Ziggy, but the performer would dare to do that only a few days later. Meanwhile, simultaneously with the tour, Bowie began working on a new album with producer Tony Visconti. The album Young Americans became David's 9th record and was released in 1975. The album was in the style of blue-eyed soul. It's when white artists perform something in the genres of soul and R&B, although the musician called its sound plastic soul. One of its compositions, Fame, was recorded together with the former member of the Beatles, John Lennon. By the way, the life story and tragic death of John Lennon deserves at least a separate video. If you are interested, write in the comments. The more requests, the sooner we'll reveal all the secrets and mysterious details of his life, which you definitely did not know about before. Now, back to Bowie. He mimed the song Fame and his other hit Golden Years on the air of the popular music show Soul Train. David became one of the first white musicians to be invited to this program. But besides musical talent, David also had an interesting filmography. In 1976, Nicholas Roeg released his film The Man Who Fell to Earth. It was based on Walter Tevis's novel and told a story about an alien who was forced to end up in New Mexico due to an accident. He tried to save his own planet from drought, and at the same time he plunged deeper and deeper into the intricacies of earthly life and human vices. Well, who better than Bowie could play the role of a space creature? In fact, at that time, David was not looking very good, to say the least. Exhausted, pale, and thin, it was the result of his addiction. However, when Roeg saw him on the screen, he was absolutely sure Bowie was the one he needed. Now the film is considered a science fiction classic.
I'd like to hear people singing. Let's have singing. Find some singing.
But David, due to the immense use of prohibited substances, could not even remember the filming process itself. In one of the interviews, he said, "I'm so pleased I made that film, but I didn't really know what was being made at all. And my one snapshot memory of that film is not having to act. Just being me was perfectly adequate for the role. I wasn't of this earth at that particular time." The artist spoke openly about the state he was in while working on the film, and even drew a parallel between the main character of the film and himself. "I just learned the lines for that day and did them the way I was feeling. It wasn't that far off. I actually was feeling as alienated as the character was. It was a pretty natural performance. A good exhibition of somebody literally falling apart in front of you. I was totally insecure with about 10 grams of cocaine a day in me. I was stoned out of my mind from beginning to end." Those were the first steps towards destroying his alter ego named Ziggy Stardust. Bowie's fictional character was increasingly destroying himself. Furthermore, the singer began a long legal battle with manager DeFry, whom David fired. As a result, the musician had to pay the manager a large share of his future income. Bowie reached the limit. According to his relatives, he shut himself up in West 20th Street, where for a week his howls could be heard through the locked attic door. He nearly died of an overdose. It became clear that if David did not come to his senses, everything would end tragically. The consequences of this lifestyle for Bowie became even more obvious during his interview with Weekend Television. Despite his good makeup and painted blush on his cheeks, he looked aloof and confused as he answered Russell Hardy's questions.
So your missus, your Angie, has been a guest on my show.
She was lovely. I saw it. I had a copy sent over to me.
In 1976, Bowie moved to Switzerland with his wife and son. The musician desperately wanted peace and minimum attention. Living in a chalet in the hills really paid off. Although the performer did not completely abandon white powder, he at least reduced its amount. David found solace in drawing and was strongly interested in painting.
I wanted to be some kind of artist. I wanted to prove myself in some field as an artist.
In the same year, he released the 10th Jubilee album, Station to Station. This work became not only one of the most significant in his career, but also the embodiment of his last invented image, the Thin White Duke. The personality and appearance of the character was influenced by the role of Thomas Jerome Newton, which Bowie played in the film The Man Who Fell to Earth. The album began with the phrase, "The Return of the Thin White Duke, throwing darts in lovers' eyes." Station to Station was filled with electronic sound and krautrock. The record was perfect from the point of view of musical arrangement. It had incredible guitar parts. But Bowie again remembered little about the period of recording the album. He said, "I know it was in LA because I've read it was." He ate nothing at all except red pepper, sometimes drank milk, but what he definitely did not neglect was a large number of substances which he could no longer live without. From February to May 1976, Bowie toured North America and Europe as part of his Isolore tour as the Thin White Duke. David believed it was his most successful tour ever. Perhaps it would be the case if it wasn't accompanied by loud scandals. The singer began to be blamed for his alleged pro-fascist views. In one interview, he called Hitler the world's first rock star. In another, he generally stated, Britain could benefit from a fascist leader. Bowie was even detained by border guards for keeping Nazi symbols. But the biggest scandal was provoked by a photo in the New Musical Express. In the picture, it seemed as if David was sitting in a car with an open top, greeting fans with a Nazi gesture. The musician began to make excuses. The journalists had specially chosen such an unfortunate shot, but after all the previous statements, David finally admitted that he wasn't himself. "I was out of my mind, totally crazed. The main thing I was functioning on was mythology, that whole thing about Hitler and rightism. I'd discovered King Arthur." Bowie also explained that all these scandals and his inappropriate statements were the result of addiction, excessive immersion in his fictional characters, and life in Los Angeles. He said the following about the last point. "Los Angeles was where it had all happened. The fucking place should be wiped off the face of the earth. To be anything to do with rock and roll and go and live in Los Angeles is, I think, just heading for disaster." Fortunately, David managed to get rid of his bad habit. Already sober, the singer apologized for all past incidents and became a fierce critic of racism. But how did the musician get on this right path? In 1976, David realized that it was necessary to do something about his life, which was becoming increasingly worse. He went to Berlin, which he would later call the place of his inspiration and salvation. Bowie continued to make music there, and locals often saw him cycling to the recording studio Hansa Ton Studio. In Berlin, he was not alone, but with the same impoverished and broken life musician Iggy Pop. They became friends in the early 70s. Bowie even produced one of the Stooges' albums, on which Iggy was the lead singer and songwriter. The artist also had a passion for banned substances. When the Stooges broke up for the second time, Iggy plunged headlong into his addiction. The use was so uncontrollable that the singer decided to go to a psychiatric hospital. Bowie was one of the few who visited him. Then David took the musician with him on tour in support of Station to Station. Some biographers suggested that Iggy Pop reminded Bowie very much of himself, so he was not only his friend, but one might even say he cared for him. It was David who offered the artist to go with him to Berlin in order to get rid of his addiction and come to his senses. There they engaged in creativity, talked a lot, and struggled with themselves. It was a perfect tandem. Bowie would start thinking about some future single, then the artists would discuss it together, complimenting each other, and then Iggy would dive into writing the lyrics. David's friendship was the light of my life. I never met such a brilliant person. He was the best there is. Iggy Pop considered Bowie his savior, who not only saved his career, but also his life. The result of that retreat was a wonderful piece called the Berlin Trilogy. It included 3 records, and each of them became a real treasure. The first, Low, was more gloomy and seemed to describe the musician's state of mind. In it, Bowie began to play with an electric sound as well as an ambient style. The next album, Heroes, was released on October 14, 1977, and was already more optimistic, and the main single of the collection became one of David's most famous songs. The third record, Lodger, was initially called the weakest in the trilogy. It went down in history as one of Bowie's most underrated works. Although the collection was very conceptual, it told about the numerous travels of the main character as well as the problems of the Western world. Lodger had less commercial success but entered the top 10 of the world charts. Berlin Trilogy had a successful creative implementation but did not bring much money. Therefore, Bowie began working on the 14th album, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. It was released in 1980 and was a huge success. The composition Ashes to Ashes became especially popular, perhaps due to the fact that one of David's first fictional characters, Major Tom, reappeared in it. The song apparently was performed by 3 of David's alter egos. David Bowie, the narrator. Do you remember a guy that's been in such an early song? Major Tom confessing his demons. Time and again I tell myself I'll stay clean tonight. And a group of persecutors giving Major Tom his last rites. Ashes to ashes, funk to funky, we know Major Tom's a junkie. The clip for the song was included in the list of the most expensive videos in history. The video was very unusual for those years. In it, David played 3 roles: a clown, an astronaut, and a prisoner. It was a real performance that could only be expected from the brilliant David Bowie. A funny incident happened during the filming of the clip. At one point, an elderly man with his dog simply entered the shot, not paying attention to what was happening. Trying to get him to back off a bit, the director pointed at Bowie and asked, "Do you know who that is?" The man looked at the world-famous artist and answered, "Of course I do. It's some cunt in a clown suit." Bowie recalled that it was a huge moment for him. It put me back in my place and made me realize, yes, I'm just a cunt in a clown suit. The song became a kind of farewell to Major Tom and probably to a difficult period in Bowie's life. Major Tom in this song can be considered a symbol of the years when the artist struggled with addiction. However, the public could not believe that Bowie was finally living in his own image. Because of this, both fans and journalists began to constantly attribute some roles to him.
You're not. This is really you. This is not you just still sort of playing the role of Paul in the film.
One wonders. I was working with Nicholas Rogan, the man who fell to earth, a couple of years ago, and he warned me that when one's finished a film, the role often carries over for many months after the film.
And what was happening in the performer's personal life at the time. The open marriage of David and Angela, to their surprise, lasted as long as 8 years. During this time, they also had other lovers, without hiding from each other, which seemed very strange to those around them. The couple divorced on February 8, 1980, after a long court process. Angela was awarded £500,000 and Bowie was awarded full custody of their son. The woman even said that she left the child with the father so that he would have an even greater incentive to abstain from various addictive substances. Angela believed that she made great efforts to make David a real star. She often accompanied him on tours, and Bowie even dedicated one of his songs, The Prettiest Star, to her. The divorce still had painful consequences for her, in particular regarding her work. So much so that the woman at some point even thought of doing something with herself. Angela also practically did not communicate with her son, and they were never close. On the other hand, David's star time finally came. His 15th album, Let's Dance, went platinum in the UK and USA. In addition to Iggy Pop, Bowie worked on collaborations with other world stars, for example, Tina Turner. And the song Under Pressure, released with the legendary band Queen, was called monster rock track that stood out, and it immediately flew to the first place in the British charts. Besides music, David continued to star in films. He was invited to play the main role in David Hemmings' film Just a Gigolo. The story was about an officer who returned from the war and, due to lack of work, went to work in a brothel. It received bad reviews and was even pulled from the box office. David took it easy, but said that he agreed to the film only for the sake of Hemmings because he wanted to film his tour. He even joked about his gigolo role. It was all my 32 Elvis Presley movies rolled into one. In 1982, David played the role of one of the vampires in the film Hunger, based on the novel by Whitley Strieber. But it was not some ordinary horror, but an 18-plus movie. Although Bowie was very bold and extravagant, even he was worried about the audience's reactions to some scenes. "I must say, there's nothing that looks like it on the market," he admitted, "but I'm a bit worried that it's just perversely bloody at some points." Although most critics noted that despite the excellent visual effects, the plot was not very well disclosed. The film became a cult classic. A year later, one of Japan's outstanding directors, Nagisa Oshima, offered Bowie a role in the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. David played the role of Major Jax the Crazy. While working on the film, the musician was amazed by the scale of the film on set and did not understand why Oshima did not use all the available locations. Oshima only shot little bits at the corners. "I kind of thought it was a waste, but when I saw the movie, it was just so potent. You could feel the camp there, quite definitely." In 1983, Bowie still managed to go on the world tour Serious Moonlight in support of his album Let's Dance. He visited 15 countries and played almost 100 concerts. At that time, it was his longest tour. Serious Moonlight was a great commercial success and brought the artist 2 MTV Video Music Awards. The 16th dance album, Tonight, namely one of his compositions called Blue Jean, inspired Bowie to shoot his own short film. In the 21-minute video single, David played 2 roles, a man named Vicky who had trouble meeting women, and rock star Lord Byron, who practically won the former's girlfriend. David received a Grammy for this film. Bowie was also engaged in writing soundtracks for films in which he participated. For example, he recorded the main track for the musical Absolute Beginners, and although the picture itself failed at the box office and was crushed by critics, its single of the same name, written by Bowie, took second place in the UK singles chart.
"We meet at last, Colin. Harry's been telling me all about you."
Fantabulous!
David produced 5 more songs for the musical fantasy film Labyrinth in 1986. There, he played the role of the Goblin King Jareth, but he did not agree to do it right away. The script of the film was worked on for at least 2 years. It was rewritten more than 20 times. When the script was almost ready, it was sent to Bowie, and he didn't like it at all. The musician believed that the film lacked lightness and humor. Director Jim Henson wanted David to star in the film so much that he still agreed to further edits, which he was later delighted with. The film used puppets. It can be said that most of the roles in the film were played by dolls. Interactions with them were unusual for the actors. For example, Bowie mentioned, "I had some initial problems working with Hoggle and the rest because for one thing, what they say doesn't come from their mouths, but from the side of the set or from behind you." The musical, which cost $25 million, did not do well at the box office. However, it became a favorite home movie and sold well on DVD. The children were delighted with the Goblin King. In one of the interviews, David said, "Every Christmas, a new flock of children comes up to me and says, 'Oh, you're the one who's in Labyrinth.'" You might think during this time, Bowie turned from a musician into a movie star and focused on an acting career, but no. Simultaneously, he recorded a new album, Never Let Me Down, which he released in 1987. David considered the record to be his return to rock and roll, but it was not liked by listeners and received a lot of criticism. After that, the musician decided to try something different. Bowie, who at the beginning of his career could not stay in any band for a long time and was constantly dissatisfied with all of them, decided to assemble his own band. So in 1988, Tin Machine appeared on the scene. Tin Machine included guitarist Reeves Gabriels, bassist Tony Sales, and his brother, drummer Hunt. Bowie stated that he didn't want to be the frontman, but on the contrary, he wanted to go into the shadows. But knowing his character, it was something impossible. In the end, David was everywhere, and in decision-making, his word was always the last. Guess what their first joint album was called? Just like the name of the band, Tin Machine. Songs were recorded in several takes, and Bowie was often able to change lyrics and improvise just by standing at the microphone. The album was dedicated to the theme of love and global problems of the world, fascism, drugs, and so on. Although the record took 3rd place in the UK albums chart, some listeners called it boring and politicized. The team went on a small tour of 12 concerts. It was very difficult for the public to perceive Bowie as just one of the members of Tin Machine. People were used to seeing David as a solo and bright performer, and it seemed that the singer had also begun to lack this. As the band began working on their second album, Bowie took a break to go on a solo tour. The tour lasted 7 months. Sound plus Vision tour was mega successful in commercial terms and became another upsurge in the artist's career. This is what Bowie said in one interview.
So, as an idol, people look up to you.
I don't think I'm seen as an idol. I think I'm seen as a more than competent songwriter who's a good performer.
In the same 1990, David's personal life changed. One of the musician's friends set him up on a blind date with supermodel Iman. Bowie immediately liked the young woman. He even said, "I was naming the children the night we met." It was absolutely immediate. At the end of the date, the performer offered to give Iman a ride home, but she refused him. Then, he invited her to tea, which, by the way, he never drank. The woman turned her attention to the performer. Although at that time, she did not want to start a new relationship at all. She was already divorced twice. In one of the interviews, Iman mentioned, "For him, it was overwhelming. I was not ready for a relationship. Definitely, I didn't want to get into a relationship with somebody like him, but as I always said, I fell in love with David Jones. I did not fall in love with David Bowie. Bowie is just a persona. He's a singer, an entertainer. David Jones is a man I met." But the woman did not have the strength to refuse David Jones. They began to date and got to know each other's families. The couple got married in 1992 in Switzerland. Before that, Bowie made an incredibly beautiful proposal to his beloved while sailing on a yacht in the Bosphorus. The couple loudly celebrated the wedding in Italy. At first, the couple wanted to settle in once hated Los Angeles, but immediately after their arrival, there began mass riots. David and Iman were shocked by what was happening and could not even leave their hotel room. Iman and I arrived in Los Angeles from Italy on the day the Rodney King verdict was announced and the riots started. It was a very numbing experience, a sense of true revolution. It did seem to have the feeling of nothing less than some kind of prison riot. People who had been treated inhumanely, not given a chance to secure any foot on any ladder, and all the social mores were suddenly abandoned. Eventually, they moved to New York. During that period, the band created by Bowie released the second record, 10 Machine 2. No one would be surprised to learn that the name was David's idea. It was the musician's most unsuccessful album not to enter the UK Top 20. The existence of the band ended there. Bowie, on the other hand, took up his solo work with renewed vigor, and his own compilation, Black Tie, White Noise, blew up all the British charts. The main track of the album was inspired by what he saw in Los Angeles. Overall, most of the album's songs dealt with his recent marriage and the topic of racial discrimination. As for the musical style, it was mostly alternative rock. The next album, Outside, appeared in 1995 in the format of an unusual musical diary. On this album, David worked together with Brian Eno, with whom he previously released the famous Berlin trilogy. Inspired by David Lynch's TV series Twin Peaks, in his work, Bowie showed an increasing obsession with the mutilation of the human body as art and the paganization of Western society. The songs seem to follow the show's main character, Detective Nathan Adler, and further reveal the other characters. The album turned out to be dark and sensual, but most people called it too difficult to understand. By the way, the single, The Heart's Filthy Lesson, became the soundtrack to the American thriller Seven by David Fincher. Bowie did not forget about cinema either. In the summer of 1996, he starred in the biographical film Basquiat, about the life of the American artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. David got the role of friend and mentor of the main character, the artist Andy Warhol. Interestingly, Bowie not only knew Andy in real life, but even had a song about him on his 1971 album Hunky Dory. The singer took this role very seriously and carefully worked on his own reincarnation. Thanks to his connections, he was able to negotiate with the management of the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh and borrow the artist's wig, glasses, and jacket for the shoot. Film director Paul Morrissey, who once worked with Warhol, was delighted with how Bowie played his character. Bowie was the best by far. You come away from Basquiat thinking Andy was comical and amusing, not a pretentious phony piece of shit, which is how others show him. Bowie at least knew Andy. They went to the same parties. David's years of fruitful work and charisma were awarded with his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which was unveiled in 1997. During this period, Bowie was simply relentless. Releasing new hits and records at breakneck speed, he celebrated his 50th birthday with a loud concert. Bowie was generally one of those who were always one step ahead. He was one of the first users of the internet. David was interested in how this new resource could be used to popularize his work even more. In 1996, he released the single Telling Lies, which he uploaded to the network and which his fans could download. But this was not enough for him, and in 1998, the musician launched his own internet provider, BowieNet, which cost $19.95 per month. And for fans who did not want to change the operator, access to the so-called Bowie fan site was offered for $5.95, for which he was even nominated for a Wired Award. Considering music, acting career, and his own BowieNet, it would be surprising if the artist did not try himself as a writer. Here's a short collection of David's achievements in this field: an essay on Jean-Michel Basquiat and another based on the book Writers on Artists. Bowie also wrote the foreword to Joe Levine's publication in GQ Cool, and the star could not pass by his wife's autobiographical book, I Am Iman. Believe us, this is far from the entire list of his achievements. It's scary to imagine what a crazy schedule the performer lived in. Besides constant work on a solo career, in 1999 he also managed to star in the film Mr. Rice's Secret. Moreover, in the main role, of course, such workaholism and talent was noticed by the community. Bowie earned a doctorate in music from Boston's Berklee College of Music, received the Order of the Legion of Honor in France, and was named the top musician of the 20th century by readers' vote in The Sun. Bowie was also engaged in supporting charity projects. For example, the musician was very interested in Buddhism, so he participated in Tibet House concerts, which raised funds for the campaign for a free Tibet. David's personal life also underwent changes. The marriage with the model Iman was incredibly happy. The woman even adopted Duncan, Bowie's son, from his first marriage. And on August 15, 2000, there was a new addition to the family. Their daughter Lexi was born. The girl's full name was Alexandria Zara Jones. The couple settled in Manhattan, enjoyed parenthood, and carefully protected their personal life from the public. At a time when, for many, the 90s were associated with difficulties and an unstable life, for Bowie it was a period of revealing his personality to the maximum. In 2002, he released his 23rd album, Heathen. The mixture of pop and art rock was very reminiscent of the sound of Bowie in the 70s, but the lyrics were completely different. In the record, he reflected on the fear of aging and how his young daughter's fate would turn out. Fans admired such a mature and performer's unusual image. Besides, during the music recording, a great number of parts on various instruments were played by David. The following year, he pleased fans with another album, Reality, and went on a large-scale tour. Everything was going great until on June 23rd, during one of the concerts in Prague, he got sick right on stage. David bent down and began to spin around, and the guard immediately ran up and took him out. At that time, everyone assumed that the artist simply had a nerve spasm in his shoulder. He continued the tour and performed at the Hurricane Festival in Schiesel. But after the end of the concert, he was taken away by an ambulance. It turned out that Bowie had a heart attack. From that day, the musician's life changed forever. Although he continued to make occasional public appearances, notably performing with Dave Gilmour of Pink Floyd and Arcade Fire, in 2006, Bowie was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Grammy. David took a, quote, creative leave, and despite this, starred in the Ricky Gervais series Extras in the role of himself, and also joined Christopher Nolan's film The Prestige in the role of Nikola Tesla. Despite the performer's pause from work, it seems that his characters continue to, quote, live their lives. In honor of the 40th anniversary edition of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars in 2012, a memorial plaque was unveiled. Besides, it happened on Haddon Street, where the legendary album cover for Ziggy Stardust once was created. Most people decided that Bowie left the music industry and retired. However, he decided to celebrate his 66th birthday with a new single, Where Are We Now? The song was included in the studio album The Next Day, which was released after a 10-year break. The album recording was kept as secret as possible, and everyone involved was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Without advertising, traditional tours, and various interviews, The Next Day became not only commercially successful but also took the first step in the UK chart and entered the top of many other countries. During 2015, Bowie worked on his equally mysterious album Black Star. At that time, he began to work on other projects. For example, he wrote songs for a Broadway musical based on the cartoon series SpongeBob SquarePants. His last public appearance took place in New York at the premiere of the musical Lazarus, for which Bowie also wrote the music. On the one hand, it seemed as if the musician was returning to creative life, but unfortunately, it was not the case. The record Black Star was released the following year on the artist's 69th birthday. David chose rather interesting and perhaps symbolic numbers. During this work, he was inspired by the music of the rapper Kendrick Lamar, other hip-hop artists, and electronics. The album turned out to be experimental, and the cover featured a 5-pointed black star with small stars below that made up the name Bowie. The official album release took place on January 8, 2016, and already on January 10th, the whole world was shaken by the tragic news. David is gone. The album Black Star began to be called a farewell song, and CNN noted that it revealed a man who appeared to be grappling with his own mortality. After this terrible event, requests to listen to David's music broke all possible records, and the album soared to the first place in the UK albums chart. Well, what happened to David? It turns out that David Bowie had liver cancer, which he fought for 18 months, and carefully hid his condition from those around him. Only close friends knew about the performer's diagnosis, including his producer, Tony Visconti, who said his death was no different from his life, a work of art. He made Black Star for us, his parting gift. I knew for a year this was the way it would be. I wasn't, however, prepared for it. He was an extraordinary man, full of love and life. He will always be with us. For now, it is appropriate to cry. Tony also revealed that David thought he had at least a few months left to live. He planned to release a post-Black Star album and had prepared at least a few new songs. Now, it became clear to everyone why Bowie stopped appearing in public and giving live performances. Despite not feeling well, the musician lost all his hair due to chemotherapy, which would immediately be a very visible signal for fans. He had hope for recovery when he went into remission in mid-2015. Unfortunately, in the fall, cancer cells began to affect other organs, and it was no longer possible to save the star. Just a few hours after the announcement of the musician's death, a new wave of Bowie fever began. A mural of David in his native Brixton has become an unofficial memorial. Similar ones appeared in almost every country the musician once visited. Fans carried flowers to his former residences, stars on the Walk of Fame, and in Milan, a flash mob was held in honor of the legend. The whole world truly missed him. His friend, Brian Eno, with whom they were friends for more than 40 years, recalled the last years of communication with David and their humorous thing, each time signing emails with fictitious names. In particular, Bowie liked to call himself Mr. Showbiz, Milton Keynes, Rhoda Barrocks, and Duke Ear. For Brian, the loss of his friend was a big blow. He said, "I received an email from him 7 days ago. It was as funny as always and as surreal, looping through word games and illusions and all the stuff we did. It ended with this sentence, 'Thank you for our good times, Brian. They will never rot.' And it was signed, Gone." I realize now he was saying goodbye. In 2017, Bowie received a Grammy for the first time in music nominations, but unfortunately, posthumously. He was awarded 5 statuettes: the Best Rock Performance, Best Alternative Music Album and Non-Classical Album, Best Recording Package, and Best Rock Song. In 2019, director Gabriel Range and screenwriter Christopher Bell decided to make a biopic about Bowie's first U.S. tour in 1971, as well as his troubled relationship with his ex-wife. David's son Duncan spoke out against the film. The man was indignant that relatives were not asked for permission and forbade the use of his father's music in the picture. Despite this, the film Stardust was released in 2020, but it failed miserably and was crushed by critics. Another documentary film about the musician was released in 2022. It was named Moonage Daydream, after the 1971 single of the same name recorded by Bowie with his band at the time, the Arnold Corns. The film showed many fragments of interviews with the performer, as well as footage from his personal archive previously unseen by the general public. The Bowie family liked the work, and the film director Brett Morgan described it as follows. "Bowie cannot be defined. He can be experienced. That is why we crafted Moonage Daydream to be a unique, cinematic experience." In fact, David Bowie's interesting and rich life could never be contained in any film. He was a person who was talented in everything. With his abilities, David could easily become not only a great musician, but also a successful film actor, writer, and artist. The characters he created continued to live on through the years, and a new generation that is just now getting to know his music is sure to join the Bowie fan club. He had an unbridled imagination and a lot of ideas, was an innovator all his life, a man who beat death, realizing an incredibly successful record just days before his death. Unfortunately, Bowie is not the only legend who left us earlier than we would have liked. Another icon with an equally bright life was Freddie Mercury. The legendary frontman of the Queen band died at the age of 45. How did a boy from Parsi conquer the whole world? What inspired Fred to write Bohemian Rhapsody? You'll learn about this and other secrets of the famous singer if you click on the video that appeared on your screen. But wait! First, like this video if you enjoyed it. It was the Encode Stories channel. See you in new videos.